Yeah, so I'm Thomas Crate, as everyone alluded to. I'm the one that makes mistakes. I catch the Duff on fire, and hopefully we learn from it. So my role is the fire management officer for North Carolina State Parks. We oversee 250,000 acres of land, so we deal with a lot of Duff. One of the jokes is that we've neglected some of these properties for over a century. So now it's our responsibility to restore fire back into these places. Boyd is really interesting. We've already discussed it a few times, but it is riddled with fire history. It's got fire exclusion, but then it's got one of the oldest longleaf stands out there. And so we have one of the oldest recordings of fire history in the Southeast locked into Boyd. So this is part of a dendrochronology study that we're working with UNCW on. So we've got fire scars that go past, the foundation of the country. So I'm not going to do this alone. I also am going to pull Jimmy into it, Jason Haywood and Michael Huffman, as far as going around the site, folks to discuss kind of the management practices out here. Jesse stole my thunder. There is no silver bullet to how to prevent. I'm sorry. So I'm just kind of, let everyone know. So these are things that we've learned over our years of making mistakes and some of our success stories. So we're in charge of fire out on Boyd. And so some of the questions that we had getting into the property, how do we maintain old growth longleaf forest characteristics? So y'all are all land manager. How would you maintain an old growth forest? Like what are some things? Do we love it to death and let it die? Do we reintroduce fire to it? What are some characteristics of an old growth forest that we need to have? Is there questions for y'all? What's that? All right, so we need some canopy gaps. What would we get in canopy gaps? So, all right, so that goes into creating an uneven age stand. So one of the problems that we joke around with, the babies don't look like their mamas, right? So when we're in these old growth stands, we've got, like Jimmy said, we've got these old longleaf trapped in the canopy. What's under there? Do we have longleafs under there? So once those trees die, what happens? Longleaf's gone, right? So we're no longer maintaining a longleaf forest. So the other thing we've got to do is that we've got to promote RCW habitat as well. And riddled within the Boyd track is that we have relic RCW trees. We know RCWs were part of this ecosystem. What do RCWs need for a successful colony? What's that? They need big old longleafs, but we got big old longleafs, but we don't have any birds. Yeah, so we need open understir. Okay, so we've got the cavities, we've got the old trees, but we don't have any birds. And so now we need to figure out how do we get the birds in here? And so another part of our mission is education. So as far as the state parks go, conservation, recreation, education. It's not one thing or the other. We're not all mountain bike and hiking trails or climber access, but we actually have to explain what we're doing to the public and why we're doing it. And so we use this as a learning lesson. So we're restoring Boyd with the public. Has anyone been to the Party for the Pine Festival? Yeah. So we use that as an outreach to celebrate, maintaining and the success of the old growth stand. But it's also we're restoring the property with the public. We're reintroducing fire actually with the public there. And then we're hosting stuff like this Duff workshop where we'll actually get to see the Duff that we're, setting on fire. And then we can take the FLIR cameras and see all that. So like Jimmy said, this is what we came across. When we got to Boyd, we were looking at this. Jesse probably cut this in the 1970s and tried to clear it out. So it just grew back up from then. So we're trying to open it up. And this is where the old tree is right here. So this is a stand that we're trying to, these trees are all 300 plus years old in the background. But like I said, the babies don't look like the mamas right here. So that's just looking at all the different, that's the same plot, just 360 degrees. And so we're going to go and look at that. And so like Jimmy mentioned, we were kind of methodical as far as our approach into the Boyd track. So we took an old field site up here. This is Boyd 4 right here. And so we reintroduced fire. And so on the day of the burn, this is February 28th. Let's see. So February 17th is when we burned it, 2017. Temperatures were 64 RH 27. Where's the KBDI at? Yeah, the KBDI was 69 right there. Okay. And so what I want y'all to kind of pinpoint is, so we got 1 hour fuels. Everyone familiar with 1 hour fuels? So when we do a prescribed burn, our 1 hour fuels and our 10 hour fuels are the main drivers of the fire right here. And so with the 100 hours, we were talking earlier in Jimmy's presentation, 17 is kind of that number where if you hit about 17% 100-hour fuel moisture, that's when we start consuming hundreds. Well, what we got right here is our 1,000 hours. We were talking earlier, 21 was that threshold. So going back in the time, our 1,000-hour fuel moisture was 19. So as Jimmy mentioned, we had rain. So 3 days prior, we had 3/4 of an inch of rain. We got a KBDI of 69. So we're like, we're good. We're in the middle of winter time. We're going to do it. And like Jimmy mentioned, we caught the Duff on fire pretty significantly, and it was a major mop-up operation. So we learned a little bit from that opportunity. And so we're like, we're not giving up. We're not giving up. So here again, so you got Boyd 4 right here. We're going to burn the block next to it, and we're going to go big. We're going to burn 16 acres out here. So looking back at that, again, we're looking at February 14th. And so air temperature 67, RH got down to 18 that day. So precipitation, 48 hours, we had 10th, 3 days, 2/10. So not a whole lot of rain. KBDI 79. But going down, like Jimmy mentioned, fuel moisture is king. So this is what we're really looking at. So our 1 hour is 6%, 11, 21, and 21. So our hundreds and thousand hours are kind of on that cusp line right there. But this was actually a very successful burn. We had done some prep, we had worked around the trees, and we were, right at that 1,000-hour fuel moisture threshold, but it was actually a very good burn and very successful. So we're starting to crank out fires out here on Boyd. And then we're feeling very ambitious. Anyone familiar with the oldest tree out there? Well, no one wants to be that person to kill the oldest living longleaf pine. So we're like, okay, we're feeling bold now. So on the February 14th, 2020, we burned the oldest living longleaf pine. So again, going back to those conditions, we're looking at the 1 hour fuels are burning, but 10 hours really aren't available. So we're just trying to do a light surface fire on there. Hundreds 24, 1,000 24. So all we're doing is a light surface fire on this. And we were pretty proud of ourselves. We didn't kill that tree yet. And let's look at the KBDI 24 out there. And then we're feeling good, and so we're reintroducing fire onto these sites. So we're following up on multiple fires. KBDI still, we're sitting at 7, and now we're just looking at these thresholds. And so we're kind of finding a routine. Is if we can keep the hundreds and thousands from burning up, we're doing pretty good out there. And then this is from last year. We burned out here. Again, so look, we're trying to pinpoint these fuel moistures, and so we're finding a lot of a success. And then let's see, this is from a couple weeks ago on Boyd track. So again, now this is a caveat right here. So this is why I'm saying we have no silver bullet. So we pulled this burn off. We had almost an inch of rain, 7/10, 2 days prior. Sopping wet, KBDI 385. So that's one of those indicators are like, oh, we got to stay out. But really, yes, the 1,000 hours, because we're in a drought situation, are low, but we actually didn't catch any Duff on fire on this. So that's why I'm trying to it's not one number. You've got a heavy rain event, saturated Duff. But so just make sure you're paying attention to all these things. And then there was yesterday. And so yesterday we burned, and we're going to get to actually look at this. And so it's not really an error in judgment. It's more of a lesson because if you want to grow things on the ground, you have to open up the canopy. We can't do mechanical harvest on everything that we do. So canopy gaps, like Carson mentioned, are very critical to the management of our property. So in strategic locations, it's okay to have some canopy gaps. And we'll get the look at this burn, but as far as precipitation, we haven't really had rain in a week. KBDI 349, looking at our fuel moisture content. And all this is taken at the same exact raw station, 1,000-hour fuels at 22%. So these are things that we're just paying attention to. So make sure when you're burning that you're paying attention to those 1,000-hour fuel moistures. And so onto the field trip. So I don't want to spoil lunch on anyone. We're going to go out to the Boyd track. For those driving vehicles, it's going to be 555 East Connecticut Avenue at the Weymouth Center. So we're going to go park at the Weymouth Center. We're going to go for a roughly 1.5 mile hike. We're going to get to see some of these fires that we've lit over the years, get to see the round timber, the oldest longleaf, and along the way, ask questions, and you know, there's a lot of history out on this property. So any questions for me?
Probably might be harping on fuel moistures, but we're using that information that you can pull from the fire intelligence portal as recon, and then we're coming to the ground and actually looking at it. We're not just coming to the ground and being like, hey, the portal said this, we're good. We're looking at it on the ground. We're using that information on the portal. No matter whether we're talking about burning in the mountains or burning all the way down the coast, as our initial intelligence. And then we get on site and make the assessments.
Yeah, and rain gauges are going to be crucial. For us, we could either be looking at Rockingham or Fort Bragg. We're kind of slapped in the middle of those two raw stations. So there's a little bit of interpretation that we have to do, but for consistency, I just pulled everything from the Rockingham station.
Review the critical values, fuel moisture, 110 and $100 that you guys use for critical value.
Yeah, so it's going to be dependent on where we're burning. So if we're burning in Piedmont or in the what do you say, the mountains, we're going to go a lot lower on some of these critical values. But roughly for a 1 hour fuel, you're looking at in the Sandhills probably about 7% is what we're looking at. And then for tens, you're looking at 9% would be a critical value. Hundreds, we're looking at 17% as a critical value, and then 21% for 1,000 hours. What would you say? Yeah, and we do sometimes go lower. So as far as like critical values go, where is it? Yeah, so here's one. This was 18% humidity, but I felt comfortable burning this with 18% humidity because I didn't have my tens or hundreds or thousands available. So I'm really just driving fire on that 1 hour fuel. So sometimes you're kind of pushing the limits on these different things. 18% is low, but when you're getting what you want out of it, yeah.
At some point, maybe not right now, but whenever it's appropriate, talk a little bit about, okay, screw up, got a ground fire, Duff fire around trees. What's your best strategy?
Yeah, so as far as mop up goes, we implement several different techniques. I'm a big fan of sprinklers. If you've got sprinklers available to you, I'm not shy to plug in sprinkler systems. I also use a surfactant called Peat Fire X. Anyone familiar with that? It's basically like a snot. So if you've got a water tank, it's a powder mixer that you can stick in your tank and it wets the water. And so what that does is water is not a very efficient way of mopping up. So it evaporates, it doesn't seep into the duff or the organics. And so we use an additive in our water to actually get further down deep into the duff. So we've been using peat Fire X well over a decade now. Don't leave it in your tanks. It smells really awful, but it's really good. It's been a lifesaver for us on some critical stuff.
And you saying you're applying that after the burn?
We can do it before and after the burn, but mainly we're applying it after the burn. Yeah, as far as like a blower and a mop up, like so the reason why we're worried about fire is that we're damaging the feeder roots. And as far as raking, we're also worried about damaging. So how many people use fire rakes in here? So fire rakes got little knives on the end of it, so you can hurt those feeder roots. As far as rakes go, I'm a big fan of leaf rakes. And so leaf rakes, they're a little more delicate around those feeder roots. But if you want to open up and not damage, so trying not to damage the feeder roots is kind of really what our goal is. And so the blowers do a really good job of getting all that heat out from around there. If you got a leaf rakes are really good. They're gentle on the feeder roots, but I would stay away from those fire rakes where you've got the little knives on the end of it, cutting them. Yeah.
Big steel.
I mean, we've got all kinds of blowers in the system, but like the BR600 would be like our lower level steel blowers that we would use. But it just depends on the park we're working at and what they have in their inventory too.
Get rid of some of the other fuel.
Yeah, it's getting rid of
Now,
yeah, it's getting rid of the fuel and getting rid of the heat. Yeah. But
Well, you bring up. When I had crew present, we talked about this little volcanic mountain, tried to bowl trees. Trees were all material away from it, and get gone. That mountain's full. What did that do for me? I got my fuel away from that organic litter, just the bowl right there. When I got out about 2 or 3 feet from the bowl of the tree, my organic matter went down about an inch versus 10. I mean, it was dramatic. You get that surface fuel away from it. A lot of times you ain't got to worry about sitting that double fire.
I think that's a real important point that I've had the most success with is expanding that flow out a
what
little bit further.
and knocking down, yeah. So we have a tendency, and we use a lot of younger kids where this is their first fire job, but they'll go in and blow it, and then you'll have this huge fuel accumulation. What we try to tell them is knock those piles down and blow them out and get that heat away from the edges that you're trying to protect. So it depends. I mean, what'd you do on the navel store trees?
It really depended on where the dove was down about each week. Once I got to that Steve, I've got to go to my home. We had a rain night before we brought this. I've actually got a picture where I'm making stuff, gets the old tree that's 10 inches. But that rain only penetrated the dove about an inch. Well, if I rain or clear that burnable material out where I've got an inch of dove that's already wet, I can ignite it. So it's just like Tom said, there's no silver bullet. You actually got to go up there and look at it, see how deep that dove is, how close it is to the bulb, kind of operating.
And Jason just brought up a good point. So yeah, we're looking at these fuel moistures, but what this raw station didn't pick up is that precipitation that occurred on the site. So again, it has to go back. You can't use this as the magic numbers because we know from our sites that we got the rain that this didn't have.
One thing that's certain, do not count on the rain the next day.
Yes. Well, and that goes back to that earlier fire that we were talking about that Jimmy and I had to mop up on for several weeks, is that when we burned this, there was like 80% chance of rain in the forecast and it missed us.
You got now you were at a 20%. Been my biggest screw up right there is that I have some wiggle room because I've got rain coming in, and when you leave that rain out, down the whistle return it.
Yeah, you know, as burners, we're in the pattern recognition. So when we see rain, like right now, we're looking at rain. We're getting rain every 4 or 5 days right now, right? Well, eventually that turns off. And so when you're burning, the more you burn, you're pushing thresholds. And then what happens to us is that we burn up until we can't burn anymore. And then we're dealing with duff fires. So, but yeah, like Jesse said, like you've got to be, you know, not dependent on that precipitation coming in, especially as you get closer to spring, those rains start to fizzle out on us. Yeah, and we'll go out there and we'll look at those.
And to the point that Deb and others have made, we're doing it relatively close to the time when we're burning spots. We've been to spots before where we blew it out like 2 days in advance, and when we got there, they were bone dry because we exposed it to sunlight, we exposed it to the wind condition, and below RH and the beat up gates. And it was bad.
For the world today, they will that trigger back. So that's why I was asking what size blower, if they didn't want to do DR8.
Oh yeah, you're good. Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 Anything over a 600, you're golden. Yeah.
Fat birds and killer longleaf is old longleaf. That's the stuff that
Yeah.
It reburn.
Mm-hmm.
Needle gas. And you got this one little stump hole out there burning 2 weeks later or something. You get that needle gas stored.
Yeah.
That'll get the duff burning again. It's already been heat treated, dried out. And if you haven't had enough rain to reset that, or you don't have enough soil moisture to kind of to keep it out of there, get any fire, re-burn it over top of that, then everything's on fire. It didn't burn the first time. And that's some of the worst duff fires.
Oh yeah. Jimmy and I were chuckling about it earlier because we were talking about KBDI under 200 and some of these other thresholds, and we were burning down in Bladen County, you know, February, perfect conditions, fire went through. Well, we didn't get rain for 3 or 4 weeks. Needles came down, fire caught back up, all the duff caught on fire. So, I mean, that is something we have to be aware of. So, and mop up is going to be critical, you know, for those spots. But if you do have smoldering fire, you do have needle cast, make sure that you're prepping those lines up, you know, every day. So if the fire does get up, it's going to stay within that footprint still. We're in good. Ready for lunch? Yep.